Easter weekend 2015, a quiet industrial building in London's Diamond District. Inside, thieves are drilling through 2 feet of concrete to reach one of Britain's most secure vaults. By morning, they'll disappear with $20 million in diamonds and gold. But here's the twist. These master criminals, they're all senior citizens, with an average age of 67. One of them even used a senior bus pass to get there. These guys spent 3 years planning what could have been the perfect crime. And they might have gotten away with it too, if they hadn't made one crucial mistake. They forgot they were pulling off a 21st century heist with 20th century methods. This is the incredible story of the Hatton Garden Heist, where 4 grandpas nearly pulled off the largest robbery in UK history. Before we dive into the heist itself, we need to understand just how long this plan was in the making. For nearly 2 decades, London's professional burglars have been eyeing the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Vault as the ultimate target. And it's easy to see why. Built in the 1940s, it housed nearly 1,000 individual safes containing the riches of London's diamond merchants and jewelers. But robbing it seemed pretty much impossible. The vault's walls were reinforced concrete, half a meter thick. Multiple layers of security protected it, including state-of-the-art alarms, heavy steel gates, and round-the-clock monitoring. Obviously, any crew attempting to breach it would need expert planning, specialized equipment, and most importantly, time. Lots and lots of time. Enter Brian Reader, age 76, known in London's criminal circles as the Governor. Now, Reader wasn't your typical senior citizen. He'd spent decades orchestrating major heists, including the infamous Brinksmat robbery of 1983, where his gang stole £26 million in gold bullion from the Heathrow airport. But Hatton Garden would be different. This would be Reader's masterpiece, the final job before retirement. But for that to happen, he knew he needed to put together a solid team. Each member would have to bring unique skills to the table, and more importantly, they had to be people he could trust. So, over the span of 3 whole years, he carefully assembled his crew. Let's meet our protagonists, shall we? Terry Perkins, age 67. Terry was a legendary figure in London's criminal landscape. He'd served 22 years for the Security Express robbery of 1983, where his gang stole around £6 million. But what made him valuable wasn't just his experience. He was also patient as a saint and very precise in the way he operated, which left little room for any sort of mistake. And that's exactly what Reader needed. John Collins, age 74. John had criminal convictions stretching all the way back to 1961, but he also had something equally as valuable, a completely ordinary appearance. He looked exactly like what he was, an elderly man who wouldn't raise suspicions in London's Diamond District, which made him the perfect candidate for the oftentimes neglected but crucial role of the lookout guy. Danny Jones, age 60. The youngest crew member standing at the tender age of 60, Danny was described in court as an eccentric who slept in his mother's dressing gown and wore a fez hat. But don't let that fool you. He was a fitness fanatic who could handle the physical demands of the job despite having not 1, but 2 artificial knees. Carl Wood, age unknown. Carl Wood would round out the main crew. Just like the others, his criminal record stretched back decades, filled with burglaries and thefts. While not as well known as some of his accomplices, Wood had the kind of street experience Reader was looking for. However, Wood would later prove to be one of the weak links in their carefully assembled team, but we'll get into that later. Now, with his retirement age crew in place, Reader was finally ready to plan what he hoped would be the ultimate pension scheme, one that would make their social security checks look like pocket change. The gang started meticulously planning every single detail. They studied industrial drilling equipment, researched alarm systems, and even had one of their team rent a safety deposit box in the building to scout the security layout. This wasn't just about breaking in. They needed to truly understand every aspect of the vault's security. Plus, their timing had to be perfect too. They chose Easter weekend for several crucial reasons. First, it gave them 4 full days when the jewelry quarter would be practically deserted. Second, many of the regular security guards would be replaced by temporary workers who were less likely to notice anything suspicious. And third, even if something went wrong, they'd have a ton of extra time to escape before anyone discovered the breach. But they still needed one more crucial team member, someone with technical expertise who could handle all the sophisticated alarm systems. This is where our story introduces its most mysterious character, a man known only as Basil, but more on him later. At 8:20 p.m. on Thursday night, the white van pulled up to Hatton Garden. The crew, wearing fluorescent jackets to look like utility workers, began their approach. Carrying a black bin bag over his shoulder to hide his face from CCTV cameras, Basil approached the building's front door. In a detail that would puzzle investigators for years, he simply used a key to enter. Now, how he got it remains a mystery to this day. Moments later, he opened the fire escape door on Greville Street, letting the rest of the gang inside. Collins, their lookout man, parked the van around the corner and positioned himself in a building opposite the vault, ready to alert the others if anyone approached. And the rest, as they say, is Hatton Garden history. Once inside, the team quickly began unloading everything they'd need for the job. Stuff like wheelie bins for transport, a hydraulic ram, industrial drilling gear, and heavy metal joists. And funnily enough, this is where the first crack in their plans started showing. CCTV footage would later reveal these master criminals had met their match. Not in the police, but in the sheer weight of their own equipment. If this is where you draw the line and say, well, maybe they should have stayed home and watched Wheel of Fortune instead, I couldn't possibly blame you. But let's get back on track here. In spite of the initial hurdles, the gang's plan unfolded pretty smoothly from there on. First, they headed to the second floor where they disabled the elevator. Then came one of the most daring parts of the heist. One or more of them had to drop down the elevator shaft to reach the basement. Remember, these were men in their 60s and 70s, scaling down a dark elevator shaft just like action heroes. But once in the basement, they faced their second major challenge, the Hatton Garden alarm system. They had just 60 short seconds to disable it after triggering it. The gang cut the power to the outer iron gate and slid it open, then smashed the lock off the wooden main door. Working with remarkable precision, they cut through a second iron gate and prepared for the main event, breaching the vault wall. Their secret weapon was the Hilti DD-350 drill, not the most powerful tool they could have chosen, but exactly what they needed. You see, unlike other drills that might have gotten the job done faster, this one was quiet enough to avoid detection while still being capable of cutting through concrete. Smart thinking for a group of old-timers. Each of the 3 holes took an agonizing 30 minutes to drill. The entrance they created was just wide enough for Danny Jones, their most physically fit member, and Basil to squeeze through. But then, disaster struck. After all their careful planning, they hit an unexpected obstacle. The steel cabinets holding the safety deposit boxes were bolted to both the floor and ceiling, something they really hadn't anticipated. Their hydraulic ram wasn't powerful enough to move them, so after hours of work, they were simply forced to leave empty-handed. This is where the gang split. Brian Reeder, who masterminded this whole thing to begin with, decided he was too old for a second attempt and bailed out. But the others weren't ready to give up just yet. Remember, this was all happening during an extended holiday, which meant that there was still some time left for them to carry out their plan. On Saturday, Collins and Jones made what would prove to be a crucial mistake. They drove Collins's white Mercedes to a shop in Twickenham to buy a new hydraulic pump. In a moment of incredible carelessness, Jones used his real name and address for the purchase. That night, they returned to the vault. Carl Wood lost his nerve and bailed out at the very last second after seeing a light on in the building. But the rest? They were determined to see it through, and this time their new equipment did the job. They managed to access 73 of the 999 deposit boxes, stuffing millions in gold, diamonds, and jewelry into their bags and wheelie bins. By the time they left early Sunday morning, they had stolen what was officially reported as £14 million worth of goods, though many suspect the true value was much, much higher. But we have to give credit where it's due. Here's the thing about these guys. They might have been old, but they definitely weren't stupid. When they left that vault, they made sure to clean up after themselves like pros. We're talking about a complete wipe down of every surface they touched, bleach on every spot they might have left DNA on, and they even remembered to grab the security camera hard drives on their way out. And get this, one of them had actually been studying forensics for dummies before the heist. And you know what? It almost worked. Almost. They made one critical error. They had to temporarily store all the loot at Collins's house until his wife returned from holiday. This forced them to quickly move everything to different locations, setting in motion a chain of events that would eventually lead to their capture. When businesses reopened after Easter weekend, the scale of what had happened inside Hatton Garden began to emerge. The scene that greeted police was one of utter devastation. The vault floor was strewn with empty safety deposit boxes, concrete dust covered everything, and discarded power tools littered the ground. At first, the police investigation seemed to be going nowhere. The thieves had been methodical in covering their tracks. After all, they left no fingerprints, no DNA evidence, and no clear CCTV footage of their faces. For all intents and purposes, it looked like the perfect crime. So how were the authorities supposed to catch them? But the investigation was about to get its first major break, and it came from an unlikely source, which was the gang's own overconfidence. Remember that white Mercedes that Collins and Jones used to buy the new pump? Well, it would prove to be their undoing. A sharp-eyed detective spotted it on CCTV footage from the area, and its distinctive appearance, white with a black roof and black wheels, made it pretty easy to track through London's vast network of surveillance cameras. The Mercedes led police straight to John Collins's North London home. Suddenly, the investigation kicked into high gear. Surveillance teams began following Collins, watching his every move, waiting to see who he would meet. And they didn't have to wait long. 10 days after the burglary, Collins met with a man just half a mile from Hatton Garden. When detectives identified him as none other than Brian Reeder, all the pieces started falling into place. Reeder wasn't just any criminal, he was notorious among the flying squad, the elite police unit tasked with investigating armed robberies. The surveillance operation expanded. Teams followed Collins and Reeder to meetings with other suspects. Phone records revealed conversations with Terry Perkins and Danny Jones before the raid. But the real breakthrough came when police managed to get authorization for something that was rarely granted: permission to bug the suspects' cars. The recordings that followed were nothing short of insane. These elderly criminals, which we've come to love, perhaps feeling invincible after their success, couldn't help but brag about their exploit. In one recorded conversation, Terry Perkins was caught showing Brian Reeder exactly how they'd broken into the vault after he'd backed out.
The only one who could get nicked was poor old Basil on the keep bit. You know what I mean?
Interestingly enough, the bugs also revealed the tensions that were tearing the gang apart.
I'll tell you what he lost, shall I? 1.6 million worth of gold he lost, plus 70 grand in notes.
I feel a bit sorry, don't you?
Give it back to him.
Give it back to him.
They argued about Reeder and Wood abandoning them, about how to divide the spoils, and about who could be trusted.
You gotta treat everyone as an enemy.
You fucking have, Dan. You can't let money out of your fucking sight.
Jones and Perkins were even caught plotting to double-cross the others, planning to retrieve hidden loot from Edmonton Cemetery without telling their partners.
You know what Basil's gonna say, yeah?
Oh, I don't know enough to challenge him, you know what I mean?
But perhaps most importantly, the recordings gave police crucial information about where the stolen goods were being stored. The gang had stashed their haul in various locations, under floorboards, in kitchen cabinets, and even in graveyards, with Danny Jones in particular, burying his share beneath memorial plaques in a North London cemetery. But the cops needed to be patient. They knew the gang would eventually need to meet to divide up their spoils, what criminals call the slaughter. This would be their best chance to catch them all together with the stolen goods. Their patience paid off when they intercepted plans for a meeting at the daughter's house of one of the gang members. And 6 weeks after the heist, the flying squad struck. In a series of coordinated raids involving over 200 officers, they swooped in on 12 addresses across London. The timing was perfect. They caught several gang members in the act of dividing up the loot. Key arrests revealed just how ordinary these extraordinary thieves' lives were. Reeder was arrested at his modest home in Dartford. Collins was found at his flat in Islington. And as for Perkins and Jones, well, they were caught red-handed sorting through bags of jewelry. The searches that followed the arrests turned up millions in stolen goods. Gold bars still bearing their original serial numbers. Jewelry boxes stuffed with diamonds. Bags of precious stones. But it was only a fraction of what had been stolen, roughly 1/3 of the estimated £14 million haul. The rest had already disappeared into the murky world of underground jewel traders and gold smelters. But one crucial piece of the puzzle was still missing. Remember Basil, the mysterious red-haired man with the key to the building? Well, finding Basil would turn into one of the longest manhunts in flying squad history. Unlike his elderly partners who couldn't stop bragging about their role, this guy was a ghost. No phone, no bank account, no credit cards, nothing that could trace him in our digital world. But detectives caught their first break when reviewing surveillance footage of Collins in the days after the heist. On April 17th, Collins met with a mysterious man in Shoreditch Park. A week later, on the 24th, he met the same man again. This time, detectives made sure to get clear surveillance photos. The two men seemed comfortable with each other, sharing jokes like old friends. Clearly, this wasn't some random meeting. The surveillance team followed this mystery man to the northern end of Liverpool Road in North London, and through careful investigation of CCTV cameras in the area, they managed to narrow down where he might be living. After crossing off name after name, they finally had their suspect: Michael Seed, a 58-year-old electronics expert and the son of a Cambridge academic. But what really caught their attention was something peculiar: his walk. Both Basil and Seed had a distinctive way of throwing out their right leg when they walked. After watching hundreds of hours of footage, detectives had seen this same odd gate again and again. When they lined up the CCTV footage of Basil from the heist with their surveillance footage of Seed, the similarity was striking. Still, they needed more than a funny walk to make an arrest. For 2 whole years, they watched and waited, building their case. They knew if they moved too soon and found nothing, they might lose their only chance at catching the final member of the gang. Finally, after 2 years of surveillance, they got their warrant. When police raided Seed's flat, they found the final piece of evidence they needed: 143,000 pounds worth of gold ingots, precious stones, and jewelry from the Hatton Garden Heist. They had finally caught their ghost. While the media often portrayed the Hatton Garden Heist as an amusing tale of geriatric gangsters, the reality was, in fact, far darker. Behind the headlines about diamond weezers and bad grandpas were real victims whose lives were devastated. Many of the safety deposit box holders were small business owners who had their entire inventory stolen. Others lost family heirlooms that had been passed down through generations. One victim described watching a grown man cry, devastated by the loss of everything he'd hoped to pass on to his children and grandchildren. The Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Company itself went bust after the raid, ending nearly 70 years of service to London's jewelry quarter. The impact rippled through the entire community. The gang members faced justice in 2016. Reeder, Collins, Perkins, and Jones all pleaded guilty, hoping for reduced sentences. Reeder got 6 years and 3 months, while the others received 7 years each. Carl Wood and another man named William Lincoln, who helped store the loot, were convicted after a trial and got 6 and 7 years respectively. When Michael Seed was finally caught in 2019, he refused to plead guilty and received a harsher sentence: 10 years in prison. After all, as the electronics expert who could defeat the alarm system, he was considered crucial to the gang's success. Even today, the Hatton Garden Heist continues to fascinate people around the world. Perhaps it's because of the age of the criminals, or the sheer audacity of their plan. The story was so incredible that even Hollywood couldn't resist. Michael Caine himself starred in King of Thieves, a film adaptation of the whole heist. But that's not all. ITV made a whole drama series about it, and there have been books, documentaries, and even stage plays. But honestly, the real story is wilder than anything they could make up. When you think about it, the Hatton Garden Heist wasn't just another robbery, it was the last hurrah of old-school criminals trying to pull off one final job in a world that had left them behind. They had all the experience, all the skills, and all the patience, everything except an understanding of modern technology. In the end, it wasn't their aging bodies that betrayed them, it was their old-fashioned methods. Today, most of the gang members have either served their time or died in prison. Terry Perkins died behind bars in 2018. Brian Reeder, the mastermind who once used his bus pass to get to Britain's biggest heist, was released early on compassionate grounds due to poor health, but he too passed away in April 2024. The rest have largely disappeared from public view. But that's not even the most intriguing part of this story. While we know what happened to the criminals, nobody knows what happened to most of their loot. 2/3 of what they stole has never been found. That's millions in diamonds, gold, and jewelry still out there somewhere in London. So while these old-timers might have lost their freedom, or their lives, they kept their biggest secret, and it might just be buried in someone's backyard. Before we wrap this up, here's something to think about. Somewhere out there, there might be another group of retirees planning their own perfect heist. So the next time you see a group of old-timers hanging around a bank vault, maybe don't write them off too quickly. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story of Grandpa's Gone Bad, hit that subscribe button for more incredible heist stories. And hey, maybe check what your grandparents are up to this weekend, especially if they've been out shopping for industrial drilling equipment.